Last Corla, and I welcome the opportunity to speak in this important debate this evening. And I suppose I would actually like to start on the issue particularly spoken about by Deputy Kenny just now, and the importance of us to put in context this debate, despite the fact that the bill we're dealing with is actually quite a technical bill, obviously crossing over 9 different government ministers. But it is important that we recognise that none of us want to see Brexit happening particularly. None of us wants to see a hard Brexit or a crash-out Brexit. And I think it is no harm to remind ourselves of what the Good Friday Agreement achieved, and all of the work over years that went to get to that point, both in Northern Ireland, indeed with Britain as well, and in this Republic. I was a member of the Forum for Peace and Reconciliation back in the 90s when I was in the Seanad, and you know, I could see how people were gradually coming to reach some kind of agreement with each other. And I think it's almost 20 years ago now since the Good Friday Agreement was signed. And I think we do need to ensure that we do everything we can here to protect our country, our citizens, and indeed people in Northern Ireland from what is the threat of a hard Brexit. And in that context, I do welcome the fact that the British Labour Party has shifted its position. And I think it is welcome that they are now looking to the possibility of a people's vote. And we don't know what's going to happen, and obviously we have to be ready for whatever does come down the tracks. But certainly I think we all need to use our influence insofar as we can to protect and to prevent what would be an appalling scenario for everybody. Just in relation to the bill itself, obviously it does cover a huge number of different government departments. As Mr McHugh is here, just briefly to refer to the issue around student grants in Part 5. We did have an opportunity in the Education Committee to engage with the Minister on the protection for students, SUSI grants, and also reciprocal grants for students coming here from Britain. And you know, I do welcome the fact that that section is in the bill. We also raised the question of Erasmus, and I know it's not wouldn't be in the legislation, but there are concerns also about Erasmus and the facility for students to travel within the European Union and in the context of Britain not now being part, that students should still be able to get that opportunity for exchange and for travel. I particularly just want to address the issue of the whole jobs area, protection of businesses, and Part 3 in particular of the bill. And while I welcome the fact that that Enterprise Ireland will have more flexibility in terms of supporting companies, in terms of research and development, and there's specific approval or provision here for Enterprise Ireland to support businesses financially and to have flexibility in that regard. I would like to see, as my party leader Brendan Howlin has said today, I would like to see this being a bit more specific around the amount of money that will be available to shore up vulnerable Irish jobs. And also I would support his call for a new Brexit jobs fund, so that we can directly support companies that are really vulnerable now in the context of Brexit being so near, or the deadline for Brexit being so close. And I'm not sure if the messages have got across to all our businesses, small and large, in terms of what is available, what they should be doing. I know there are ads on radio, etc., but you know, I still think that there may not be the level of understanding or information that would be required. And I would again ask the government to ensure that is available to people. I'm particularly, as a representative of the Midwest, particularly concerned about agriculture and the agri-food sector, which would be very strong in our part of the country. And also the question of connectivity for businesses. We have a lot of multinationals, for example, in the Midwest, and also indigenous industries that very much rely on our international airport connection through Shannon. And we're concerned that obviously Heathrow is the main hub that serves Shannon and gives onward connectivity to other parts of the world. And we need to ensure that, that there is access to that onward connectivity for businesses in the Midwest. And again, there is a real concern about that. And in relation to Shannon Airport, I mean, the figures that were published last summer, showed that 96% of growth in Irish air traffic in the past 5 years was in Dublin. And we see the extra runway now causing some controversy in North Dublin. But we could certainly do with the airport noise that they have a problem with in North Dublin, because we don't have enough airport noise in our part of the country, and certainly in terms of and Cork as well, Minister, but certainly in the context of the national planning framework and the aims to rebalance the country, certainly in terms of connectivity, I would make a strong argument that there should be more support for Shannon Airport, and I'm sure the Minister here present would say the same about Cork. But it is a real concern now in the context of Brexit, particularly because of the importance of Heathrow for connectivity for the Midwest and the West, indeed other parts of the country as well. I want to raise a particular issue with regard to businesses in the Midwest, and it is particularly in relation to the med tech sector, but I think it probably applies to other sectors as well, though the discussions I've had were specifically with companies in the med tech sector. But there are what are called notified bodies that are used in that sector, which are British-based or UK-based. And a notified body basically is an organisation designated by an EU country to assess the conformity of certain products before being placed on the market. These bodies carry out tasks related to conformity assessment procedures set out in the applicable legislation when a third party is required. And it's been estimated for the MedTech Secretary that they estimate that between 30 and 40% of medical devices are approved by UK designated approval notified bodies. And I know there are discussions going on at the moment, I think in Brussels mainly, that there should be a reciprocal arrangement between Britain and the European Union to recognise each other's certification. But if that doesn't happen, then there is a real threat to both local jobs and the availability of medical devices for patients. So this is a real concern. I know, I'm sure, Minister, yourself, you're probably aware, but I know that Minister McEntee is aware, and I think our PERM reps, etc., are discussing this issue at the moment. But it's a real concern for the medtech sector in terms of those notified bodies, and that there is recognition of the UK bodies from the EU side and of EU bodies from the UK side, so that these businesses won't be disrupted, and that the various medical devices that are being made, and there are a number of companies in the Midwest that, and I'm sure in other parts of the country as well, that they're not disrupted. So I would ask the Minister to be particularly aware of the importance of resolving this, and as I say, I think there are discussions going on currently in Brussels with regard to this. So I suppose I just particularly wanted to raise that particular issue, because I don't think it has been raised in the debate so far. I also just briefly want to refer to a couple of other sections in the bill. I think the social protection part 11 and the protection of employees part 12 are also really important in terms of so many Irish people have worked in Britain at various times, and their pension situations or social welfare, you know, and a whole lot of, I suppose, interaction between the UK and Ireland over the years that affect individuals, and it is really important that those sections are absolutely waterproof, I suppose is the right word to use, in terms of protecting people's livelihood, people's incomes and pensions, etc. And I know they're relatively short sections, but they are really important. And I think, again, I think Deputy Quaylon referred to the fact that the heads of the bill had some elements in the health section that aren't actually in the bill, and I think the same would apply in the social protection section. So just, I suppose, to flag that, to ensure that there is full protection in that area. Apart from that, I didn't really want to go into any other part. Obviously, there are a lot of sections, and there are particular sections that you know, all of us would have a particular concern about. But I am, very much concerned that businesses, that jobs, that workers and all of that goes with that, that they are protected insofar as possible. I think, we can't fully predict what might come down the tracks, but we have to predict as much as we can and put in preventative measures insofar as we can, and particularly put in the kind of supports that will be necessary, the kind of connectivity that will be necessary, and the kind of regulations that will be necessary to, insofar as possible, to keep these things flowing smoothly should Brexit, and I presume, well, whether it comes about or obviously if it doesn't come about, we'll all be rejoicing, but if it comes about, either being delayed or happening on the date that's expected on the 30th of March, we need to do absolutely everything we can, and we need real contingency plans and real funding in place so that we can preserve jobs and stabilise businesses. And they're the main concerns that I have, along with others that have been expressed in this House. We obviously will be supporting the bill, but I think we will all want to ensure that there are actions that are outside of the legislative provisions in this legislation that will do everything we can to protect Ireland, its interests and its citizens, as well as people in Northern Ireland, from what could be a fairly disastrous situation for us, particularly for the British people, but also for us here in Ireland. Cormac.